We are go live in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Starts a real life.
Good morning, good afternoon, all, and welcome to yet another eventful webinar by the AI and ICAI committee. I am sorry for the throat and the dress. I am actually on a off, but I think the excitement is with regards to the important topic today, which is on DPDP, data privacy and data uh,
Protection.
protection. Sorry, data protection. Friends, I have with me my chairman, AI committee, Umesh Sharmaji, who happens to be, driving very effectively the entire AI committee as such. And we are able to move forward in a true spirit with lot of such webinars, lot of new interactions, lot of new thoughtfulness, which is there in the committee. And the kind of publications which are getting released. And most importantly, in that entire process, the opportunity which is given to most of the new people to come and share their articles, that itself is something which is making the waves in the ecosystem. Rather, that is actually creating a positive frame of mind among all the young and senior members with regards to adopting technology in a true sense, and most importantly, training, giving training to people. And now we have raised our bar to go for publication by writing articles. This positivity which we have seen over a period of this year has been, a lot of motivation for all of us in a true manner. Sorry. And then we have a very important faculty with us today, which is basically Mr. Narsimhan, who happens to be a very good friend also and a faculty who has been part of developing the AI curriculum when we started last year. And also he is faculty in a DAB as such. With permission of my chair, let me speak as a chairman of Digital Accounting and Assurance Board. Today we are doing a DPDP webinar. But let me share with you, friends, DPDP certification is also been approved by the council under the Digital Accounting and Assurance Board. And shortly, hopefully on 1st of January, we are going to launch our first certification course on DPDP across the country. This is going to be 3-day course and a lot of new things which are happening. But now let me come back to AI. In AI, digital privacy and digital protection is becoming a key. I hope most of you might have attended the AI certification course. And by now, you have heard the concept of guard railing and protecting your data, which is not available for public, but using public data. How you need to create your AI agent with the kind of guardrails you need to create to ensure that your own data or your client related data is not going anywhere. Just to share with you one particular example, which I think Umesh sir also will have. I'll also share mine example, where we are currently doing one particular engagement in which we have taken more than 3,000 pages data, which is primarily 200 GP data. And we have used a AI agent. In that entire process, we have created an entire guardrail. By virtue of that, this data of my client is never going to be shared with anyone. People have fear. If I use OpenAI, will this data will go out? But similarly, when you talk about Copilot, because of Microsoft standing and all, they have created certain rules. Like SAP has also created, Tally has also created. The most important point is there are options to switch on and switch off, which you should be aware of. The company will provide you the details that you can switch on or switch off any data, right? So that information that has to be there in your mind, that will actually happen, that will trigger in your mind whether the software is having that switch on, switch off mode or not, only and only when you understand the sensitivity of the data which you are using on the platform. Right? So this DPDP webinar is going to give you an exposure towards how you need to sensitize your mind, your data in a systematic manner so that this entire analysis of operating your own AI agent or AI tool will give you that kind of protection and satisfaction that my data is not going out. So my best wishes to you all people to learn this uh, process through this webinar with a person like Narsimhan, who happens to be a very good friend and also a mentor in ICI. And most importantly, let us listen to the words of Chairman AI in ICI. Over to you, Umesh Bhai.
Correct. Sir, thank you, our founder chairman, Dayanivas Sharma sir, who was there when this committee was formed. And today we are in the second year of this committee. So this is all भगवान की और आपकी दया है सर चल रही है गाड़ी so friends welcome to this AI webinar on DPDP and as pointed out by Daya sir certificate course is already there under DAP so you will be master in future once this certificate course is launched and today we are just having discussion between the two topics AI and DPDP so please note that wherever you are in artificial intelligence arena, what is the effect of DPDP? And as a chartered accountant, we are more concerned about our independence, our integrity, and our trust. So once a project comes or once a assignment comes or as a CA, you are using any AI tool, so how the laws of land are applicable to that. And in that, the first and the foremost important law is DPDP Act, which is coming up, which is already there in all of us. So our learned speaker, Narsimhan sir, will take us to the intricacies of this topic with relevant to AI. And for more details, certificate course is planned under that, which you can go and do it. Friends, a small publication will also come up regarding this in future relating to artificial intelligence. And one most important AI's impact on Indian economy. The third book has already been out. It is available on our CDS portal. Already ethics and privacy books of AI in ICI committee are there. And level 2 is already launched of AI in ICI courses. So please stay connected with your WhatsApp group. We are sharing information there. We have started prompt competition. So prompt writing competition is already there. Near about 40 plus prompts are already been uploaded by our members. Wherever the batches are happening, the participants are also adding that prompts in our prompt library. So you can use that prompts. Hackathon just finished. We season 4 grand finale in Baroda on 5th of December. So we will be soon launching Hackathon 5 season also. So stay connected and send your suggestions, send your comments to me or Daya sir, and we will take care how to take ahead this. So with these words, welcome to this webinar and happy learning. Over to you, Narsimhan sir.
Thank you so much. I see close to about nearing about 1,000 members, if I could
Yeah.
say
So you
that.
are a superstar, Narsimhan sir.
Thank you for this very warm respect and wishes. It's always fantastic to contribute to the alma mater. And one very important point I want to make a mention is my career growth and my knowledge journey has always been coterminous with my contribution which I've done to the ICAI. So the more I've contributed, the more knowledge I've acquired, and as a part of it, more has my business grown, right? So it's a very simple triangle, and I'm very happy to contribute that. Of course, generally when I get started, my mind keeps on thinking, okay, how do I make a concept, topic, any of these simple? And that's when I get started. And with that as a background, I'll quickly get going. Hopefully, let me see if you're able to see my screen. Quickly going to share it. Yes, I have the access. Okay. And if you could confirm that my slide is visible and you're able to see this clearly?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes,
lovely.
yes.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. So, first and foremost, ladies and gentlemen, a very warm afternoon. Thank you for joining in a very, very huge number. I see about 1,000 plus members here. I'm really happy and grateful for this. So, my first fundamental question to you is why and what has this data privacy law introduced and brought into picture? And what is the landscape under which we need to evaluate it? That's basically my objective of me doing this session. And over the next few slides, I'll give you perspective, what you need to do as AI solutions, how you need to safeguard, all of those things we'll be discussing. Okay. So the first fundamental thing, of course, quick intro about myself. My name is Narsimha Nilangovan. I'm a chartered accountant specializing in cybersecurity, technology consulting, and AI advisory. I happen to do a lot of IT audit, cyber audits, and data privacy engagements. And that's where my interest on the subject kept on increasing. And over a point of time, I realized that this is something which is going to shape the future. In fact, if you ask me, if the era of 2010 onwards, the very huge importance on security, everybody started making a mention of it. So 2020 onwards, the era we have already started seeing privacy coming into picture. So we'll speak about all of those. And I've addressed close to about 5,000 plus national and international conferences. Also spoken at most of ICAI, ISACA, and fairly large international conferences such as this. And I was fortunate to be amongst the top rated and the youngest speaker. I was very happy when the alma mater had recognized me as a Cloud Risk Champion Award, the only chartered accountant to get this recognition. And it was very nice that, small contributions from me had a larger implication, right? So that's a quick brief about me, and I'm quickly going to get started with the topic. The first fundamental question I want to clarify to everybody is the concept of what exactly, or rather, what exactly is data privacy and how does it really matter in this entire context of things? Because many a times we are actually confused of what exactly is data privacy, what is the meaning of security, and how does it really matter. So I thought I'll first give the clarity on that, and then I'll go into this history and how the act came into picture and things like that. First, what is the meaning of security, privacy, and protection? Most of us, when we use the word privacy, we often are under the misconception that privacy is equal to security, which is not the case. I'll give you a simple example. Let us say you have a trade secret with you. Okay. And that trade secret could be a Coke formula, a McDonald's burger, the way it is done, or even a simple tea or a bun maska, which is prepared, right? It's a sort of a proprietary element. Now, the way and style of preparing it is very, very secure because it should not be leaked out. And therefore, we say that this should be secure, or this information or data should be secure. Now, this information or data, when we say it's going to be secure, that means we are going to say, hey, we are focusing on the CIA principle, confidentiality, integrity, and availability. That means you are safeguarding on how the data has to be kept away from unauthorized access, unauthorized breaches, alteration, tampering. But that does not mean that the way you use the data is in a organized or a structured manner or with after permission. Let's take example two. The same you, instead of keeping data of, let us say, a trade secret, rather you had the CRM data of 1,000 customers and their preferences in online shopping and probably the preferences in what type of a movie they watch. Now, this data with their phone numbers, you start calling them up, you being a part of the organization. Now, you call them up and say, hey, I saw you last time watch this horror movie. Why don't you watch this series and I'm going to give you a 10% discount? Now, don't you think the person who's receiving the call will be flabbergasted? He's like, oh my goodness, what is this guy up to? Right? Remember, in this case, you as the organization are using the same data, which means I am organization in a secure manner. I'm using it, but I'm using it for a purpose for which the data was not given, or rather for the data was given for some other purpose. I'm using it for a different purpose. So privacy talks about how personal information, how it is collected, used, and stored. I hope that is clear. The fundamental concept I want to clarify is data privacy is all about how you collect and manage the personal information. Right? Now that you know how this matters or how this is basically run, then comes a very interesting question. Why is this law called as the data protection law, not the data privacy law? If you see the verbatim language of the law, it is data privacy and data protection, DPDP law. So why that word protection also comes in? Because when we use the word protection, we are focusing on both privacy elements as well as the security elements. That means we are primarily saying not just should you focus on privacy, we should also focus on security, and both of them are together necessary for you to take a call and decide. And therefore, my dear friends, or hence the word data protection, and therefore DPDP, Data Privacy Data Protection Act. Okay, now we have been talking about privacy everywhere, and we're talking about personal information. What exactly is this personal information? Now, if you see in the slide, this is just an example of certain elements from a personal information. It could be the name, it could be email address, it could be your contact number, it could be your photo. Each and everything, my dear friends, is treated as a personal information. And you know what? In the AI world, there are certain things which are very, very important. And those are your IP address, your cookie data, your location data, right? And your social media profile. All of these are very interesting because this, my dear friends, please be careful. In the AI world, organizations have a catch of all of this information and they can use it for advertising or marketing or probably making money out of it. As we say, data is the oil of the current century, which means he who has control over this personal information can do something way beyond what you could even imagine. And that is where it is very crucial for you to understand the means, purpose, how personal data is obtained and collected. Just to give an example, you are signing up into an AI application. When you sign up to an AI application, it clearly says that something called as a privacy notice and how you use it, right? And why is that very important? How is it that you're going to use your personal data or you're giving some information? How is it that the AI app is going to use it? It could be OpenAI, Gemini, it could be Cloud, whatever you're using. When they collect this information, they are processing it, right? But what is very important is, especially in the generative AI world, not only do they collect some information, lot of information when you share, assuming in the chat you're writing some confidential information and sharing it, it is going to become a very tricky affair, right? It is going to become a risky affair because that information may be reused for some sort of a documentation and information perspective. As a matter of fact, recently one of I think yesterday or today, one of my colleague or friend shared something on the WhatsApp group where he said a company, one of a AI app, I think it was Grok if I remember it right, had inadvertently started sharing personal information about some person, right? Now if this information is available from a website or a social media or something, that's a different story. But somebody has uploaded this data and this being reused is going to become very, very tricky. And that is where knowing when and what this personal data and how you handle this matters a lot, right? Now if you look into the history of this data privacy law, right, the first thing what happened was in 2017 a judgment was passed by, which is popularly called as the Puttaswamy judgment, where for the first time in the history of India, privacy was recognized as a fundamental right under Article 21. But the moment this was recognized, that is where, my dear friends, things started changing. For the first time, when India recognized privacy as a fundamental right, there was a big requirement to say, hey, that means we need to have a law to protect it. And a person by name Justice Sri Krishna, he formed under his committee, under his chairmanship, came up with a beautiful set of recommendations. Very good set of recommendations. In fact, those who are interested from an academic standpoint, you should go and read up this document. Very nicely drafted. Of course, it's a fairly lengthy document, and some of you might upload that into some AI app and make a downsized version of it. But anyways, that's a very good set of a document having a lot of interesting pointers on that. Now that became the basis for they drafting the Personal Data Protection Bill. The bill came out in the year 2018, 19, and 21, three iterations, but none of them got through. And then what happened in 2022 was shocking. They added one word called digital into the law. Digital Personal Data Protection Bill, right? Digital Personal Data Protection Bill. And then the Digital Personal Data Protection Bill became the Digital Personal Data Protection Act in the year 23. And then in the 25, the rules actually came out. Now, when this entire thing came up, what was very interesting to note is that 23 or 22 onwards, the transition to the word digital, because it was felt that it was impractical for us in a country like India to control the whole of the privacy framework. Therefore, they said we will focus on the digital personal information. And therefore, what is the meaning of digital? Any personal information in a digitized form amounts to be a digital personal data for which the act is applicable. Example, I have a business card which I'm giving it to you. It is a personal data, but it is not a digital personal data. What you do, you take this data, you take a photograph, you scan it, you send an email, you save it in an Excel sheet, you upload in a CRM software, whatever you do, it becomes digital personal data. I hope it's clear, right? So that is where the first foundational step comes into picture. Second, the law was notified in the act was the rules came up in the year 2025. To be very specific, November 13th 2025. I think probably about 3 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks, we are nearing about that, right, before. Now what this law came up and said, and what was the transition, you should be aware. Prior to August 2023, right? Of course, we did not have, I would still use this as prior to November 2025, but still, just to make a reference, right? Prior to August 2023, while I do not say that India did not have a privacy law or a framework, we did have some amount of regulations by virtue of section 43 capital A of the Information Technology Act 2000 as amended 2008. Right? That was the original requirement. Now, why do I say it is repealed? At this point, it is repealed. Now, there, the law says principle of reasonable care in handling personal data should be taken care. And the scope of this digital personal was very narrow. In fact, it did not speak about digital at all. It just spoke about certain information on how you handle and how you need to take consent. And there was obviously a penalty which went up to about 5 crores. And compliance was mostly defensive. That means if something happened, you had to go do it. And more important, there was no rock solid authority to enforce it. That was the biggest issue. Then came the post-August 23 era, because that's when the DPDP came. And mind you, DPDP came into picture. It was not notified. The notification came November 2025. So during this framework, what happened was, while DPDP was a primary framework, people started understanding that, hey, if not now, in next few years, you will have this law. So people started focusing on obtaining consent, where you're using, how you're using, all of those. And the fear factor, which you should keep in mind, is the penalty, which went up to 250 crores. So therefore, there was a lot of compliance which people started thinking of. But the problem over there was people never knew when this law will come into picture. And that is where the tricky situation was. And this all issue got settled on November 13th, 2025. And they came up with a very simple, plain vanilla setup. They said November 13th, the Data Protection Board, their powers and certain definitions were notified. 1 year from that date, which is November 13, 2026, there is a person called as consent manager. We'll speak about that. their powers came into picture. And by the way, the consent manager could be using a lot of AI based solutions and implications. We'll address that. And last is 18 months from November 13th, 2025, which is May 13, 2027, technically the whole of the act is applicable. So all of us in 18 months from now, for us as clients, our alma mater, all of us will have to adhere to this, right? And bear in mind, very soon you will have our institute also asking or taking privacy consent from you folks as to how they process the personal information. Very interesting game, right? Now, what was the major change which happened from the prior era and this one, right? So the consent was required under section 43 capital A, whereas now the DPDP and the rules says you need to take an explicit consent. Now this is where the biggest difference is. Now many of them you would have noticed in their website they have written, by visiting your website you hereby agree. That means just by visiting the website you have given a consent. That is implicit consent. The data privacy law talks about explicit consent and, very important, specific consent and documented consent. So if you're using an AI app, you, my dear friends, would be required to give these sort of consents. On the contrary, reverse. A client or an enterprise customer of yours might tell, hey CA firm, hey consultancy company, hey advisory organization, if you are using any of these technologies, and if you're using some of the AI solutions, you have to explicitly take consent from me before you use the AI app because I am a little concerned, right? So please bear in mind. Second is from an accountability, where in the DPDP there is a clear-cut responsibility is defined on the person who's processing this entire information. And the scope in section 43 is digital data. Here it goes to process data, metadata, and all of those things. Compliance is post-breach focus. Here it is pre-processing, ongoing. Very important. DPDP folks speaks from a continuous assessment, right? And most important, there is an enforcement authority. And who is that enforcement authority? Data Protection Board, which has been constituted on November, or rather the power to constitute has come up in November 13, 2025. Very soon you will find the authority coming into picture, right? And of course, we spoke about the penalties. Now, certain interesting things which you should be aware before we go on into this, right? Now, there are three major pillars who drive this entire law, right? There are three major pillars who drive this entire law, and I'll take a minute to speak a little more about them, right? Now, who are these three pillars and why are they absolutely essential, right? Now, if you look from a law perspective, the first person whom you should know is called as the data principal. Data principal, my dear friends, is nothing but whosoever personal data you are processing, such person is called as the data principal. To give an example, you're processing my data, then I am the data principal. So the AI app which you are using, my dear friends, if they are processing your personal information, and it is 100% likely that they will process your personal information, because they will take your name, they'll take your email ID, they'll take your mobile number for OTP, they will take your credit card, because your subscriptions, right? All of those. I don't, some of you might be using different AI apps, right? There are subscriptions. And not just that, every AI app remembers your search history. And you try to write a prompt in your system, the same prompt you write in a different system, the answers are different. Why? Because the AI systems also learns from you as to how they should be answering. So which means that is also personal information. So the data principal is nothing but you and I who are sharing data to the AI app. On the contrary, remember, the client whose income tax return or GST return or any of them we are finalizing and filing, they are also the data principal in that context, right? So depending on situation, you have to decide who the data principal is. Of course, there are some cases, in case of a child, the guardian or the parent will be treated as the data principal in addition to the child. And in case of a person who's disabled, then the guardian can come into picture. Second most important principle, fiduciary. Fiduciary is the person who decides the means and purpose of processing the data. I repeat, the means and purpose of processing the data is decided by the fiduciary, right? Because this, my dear friends, is the key game changer. Now, what is the meaning of means or purpose? Now, you are sharing an information to the AI app. Do you know how the AI app is going to use your data? Right? So, to whomever you are sharing, that entity or person is the fiduciary. Because that AI app is the person who's deciding the means and purpose. On the contrary, you are receiving some personal information from clients. In that case, the person who is giving the data is your client, whereas what are you doing with it? You're going to process that, right? So then you are the fiduciary. I hope it's clear. So remember, a chartered accountancy firm is likely to be a fiduciary in most of the cases, because you would be processing personal information of your client or your client's client, some cases depending on situation, but you're likely to be fiduciary. Second, we as chartered accountancy firms or entities or consulting companies, whatever name called, multidisciplinary firms, right? So many so I'll use the word professional firm. So we as a professional firm, we would also be processing the salary for various who? Various employees and article staff. So we would obviously process the personal information. Therefore, we are in the capacity of a fiduciary. Now let's take a different scenario. What if I as a CA firm am auditing the payroll of my client? I repeat, I am auditing the payroll of my client. Now, as a part of payroll, the company has, let's say, 100 employees and their PAN, Aadhaar, everything is there. And you want to use their PAN to identify some duplicate check, some validation check, something relating to a professional services. What would you be? In that case, you are a processor. You are processing the personal data on behalf of a fiduciary. Well, an audit can also come under a fiduciary and a processor depending on the context, right? But the crux is very simple. The crux is we are responsible for collecting personal information, and therefore we need to be extremely cautious as to how you handle this personal information, right? In the global context, right, data principal is called as the data subject. Data fiduciary is called as the data controller, and processor, the name continues to be as it is. The fourth, they brought in a new category of a person called consent manager. Now, consent manager is like an intermediary, like your KYC registration authority, to whom you give the consent. He in turn manages the consent of others. I have a small graphical image. Probably a little later I'll show you. I found that on the internet, so I'll give credits to whoever had created. But yes, you will find it there. Okay. So hopefully you got clarity on this. Let me give another example just quickly. You are using an AI app such as ChatGPT, right? So ChatGPT would be the data fiduciary. You are the data principal. Clear? And data processor, if ChatGPT is hosted in, let's say, AWS, Azure, in this case, ChatGPT is hosted in Microsoft's data centers, Azure, then data Microsoft will become data processor. And then, of course, you have consent managers, which are all, giving consent, managing, and things like that. Right? A few other definitions. You should know what is the meaning of processing. Any form of using of personal data is processing, right? Any form, right? Just to give an example, it could be modifying, it could be altering, it could be changing, anything on those lines could become processing, right? And what is very interesting is this definition called as personal data breach. Any unauthorized, any unauthorized usage of personal data is treated as a breach. I repeat, any unauthorized usage of personal data is treated as a breach, which means if I send a personal email, instead of assuming a common email I'm sending them in CC instead of BCC. So everybody gets to know everybody's email ID. This could tantamount to breach. And when there's a breach, how much is the penalty which is there, right? And child, I think we already know what the definition is. So fairly, I hope you have got clarity on some key provisions. Now quickly we'll move on to the applicability portion. This law is applicable if you are processing digital personal data. So if you are processing digital personal data, my dear friends, this law will always be applicable. But if you are saying that this processing I'm doing, the next question you need to see is, are you processing this in India? If the answer is yes, it is applicable. But if your answer is no to this, that means you are processing personal information outside India. Please check whether it is for processing or offering the services within India. Then the law is applicable. Otherwise, the law is not applicable in that case. Hopefully, you got some clarity on that, right? So this is called as extraterritorial jurisdiction, which means, again, this map not to scale, just for a theoretical purpose. If the data is collected within India, obviously it's applicable. Collected in India, processed in India, but it is collected outside India, but it is processed in India, right? Or it is even collected inside, outside, it really doesn't matter, but it is processed outside for service to be rendered here. A classical example could be a passport visa authorization, right? Is you are sharing the data, but they're not rendering a service here, they're rendering a service there. On the contrary, for a flight ticket booking, right, for a British Airways or for a, let's say, a Malaysian Airways or any of these, right, in those cases you should keep in mind that for them, because you're sharing the personal information, even though it is for flight ticket monitoring, etc., DPDP would be partially applicable in that context, right? There are few exemptions. If it is for domestic use, let's say आपका personal car driver or maid or any of them, you're collecting some data, in that case it is exempt. And if the data is already made publicly, right, so a LinkedIn profile you got it or anything on those lines, then to some sort of an extent it would be exempt, right? So hopefully you've got clarity on that. Now, the last word, I also made a mention of consent manager. So consent manager, this is where I found this image online. I would want to give credits to whoever that person is. I missed noting the name of that, but I found this as a nice screenshot. So the data principle, which is you and I, when you're using, let us say, some AI app, right? Now we may want to give consent. Instead of giving consent directly to the AI app, I may want to give the consent via consent manager, right? So it's more like an intermediary. Please note, consent manager is optional. It is not mandatory, right? So now, having understood this, let us quickly look into one of the favorite apps which we sort of use more often than not, right? We will look into how the privacy obligations of a company like ChatGPT operates, right? So I'm quickly going to navigating this, right? And please bear in mind, we should take this with a pinch of salt, because this is a law which has just come in applicability in India, right? So we'll have to see how this could have a repercussions. So I'm quickly swapping my screen to the privacy policy. Please look into this. This is a privacy policy of OpenAI, right? And here, and this is an AI app, right, which more or less all of us are using it daily here. So here it says, this of course updated on June 25, and it predominantly says for individuals in Europe, because you have to read a different version of policy. Why? Because in Europe you have a different privacy setup altogether. Maybe in future you will have it for individuals in India, you will have to use that, right? So it talks about how it deal, what it does, and it says clearly what is the personal data OpenAI is collecting about us, right? It collects account information, and I'm sure you know what is account information. When you're signing, you are giving access to all of this: your name, contact, account credentials, including date of birth and payment information and transaction history. Second, most important, personal data, user content. We collect personal data that you provide in the input to our services. That means in the prompt, whatever you're typing, that is a user content. That is also personal information, including your prompts and other content you upload, which means this personal data they are basically collecting. Now, what they're doing with it, we don't know. We'll come to it. Second, communication information. If you communicate with us, that is okay. emails and other things. The other information you provide, we collect information that you may provide to us when you participate in event or survey. I think this is fine. I think what is concerning for me is this user content. Okay. So whenever you're using an AI app, please remember it is this sort of information which is being collected. Now, the personal data we receive from your use of services. This is very interesting. That means by you using the services of ChatGPT, you are generating some personal information, and this are also referred to as technical information. For example, log, usage data, device information, location information, which means that ChatGPT does take some location related information from you, right? And cookie and similar technologies. And last could be information received from other sources. So this is basically the personal information they collect. Now, if they are collecting this much of personal information, what are they using that? Let's see that. We use your personal data for the following: to provide, analyze, and maintain our services, right? To improve and develop our services and conduct research. Look at this. Your personal data, which includes the usage data, is used by ChatGPT to improve and develop their services and learning models. That means whatever information you are sharing with the generative AI, they are using it to improvise, right? To communicate to you, to prevent fraud, illegal activities, and things like that, right? So this is very important that you should be aware of. Disclosure. Look at this. We may disclose your personal data in the following circumstance. That means they might disclose our data to others also. Who are these? Vendors and service providers. Who are these typical fellows? To assist in meeting business operations, etc. Let's say they're using Cloudflare. Now, Cloudflare may want to do some authentication. Therefore, it is necessary. For business transfers, say for example, by virtue of merger amalgamation, OpenAI got acquired by somebody else, government authorities and other third parties, right? Affiliates, very interesting. This is where you might probably go ahead and disclose the data to affiliates. Now, who is affiliates? I will leave it to you to go interpret. Business account administrators, especially if you are using enterprise, this is understood because you are giving it to your own organization, right? And then comes retention. The personal data shall be retained depending on the settings. For example, ChatGPT temporary chat will not appear in history and will kept up to 30 days for safety purpose. So those of you who thought that if I keep ChatGPT in anonymous mode and do whatever I want, my dear friends, no, 30 days stuck, somebody is still watching you, right? So hopefully you got an idea about it. And then it talks about your rights and it talks about children, security, all of these things, right? So you'll talk about US states, disclosures, etc. Like this, you will find a lot more things coming up from an India standpoint also. So hopefully you got that flavor, my dear friends, how and what is personal information and where to use. I know most often than not, we will not read these personal information or personal security, but just wanted to give you a heads up on this, right? Now comes a very interesting word: significant data fiduciary. The central government may notify certain people as significant data fiduciary. Now, these include people or organizations who are processing high volume or high sensitivity of personal data. They are impacting because the risk, whatever they have, it might have an impact on the rights of the data principle, or there could be a potential impact even on the sovereignty and integrity of India. So these fellows, the big guys, are treated as significant data fiduciaries, and the law casts additional obligations. Three major additional obligations. Data protection officer is mandatory, just like how you are CFO. Now you will have a DPO, data protection officer, is mandatory only for SDF. I repeat, only for SDF. Second, you need to get an independent data audit done. Another professional opportunity for us. And last, conduct DPIA, data protection impact assessment audit. Right? So these are, I would not use the word DPIA as audit. I would rather use data protection impact assessments, because that is also something they have to conduct on a periodical basis. In fact, once in 12 months, they say you have to conduct it. So these three are additional obligations if you are an SDF. Now, who could be an SDF? Probably it could be, I think I have a slide here. Yeah, I think I've missed that. Yeah. So who could possibly be an SDF? Maybe an SDF could be, let's say, a social media company, a bank, an insurance company. Any person dealing with this large volume of data could be an SDF, right? So all of these people could come within the banner of SDF, right? So I hope all of you are clear with this. Okay, so at this point, we don't have clarity who will be the data auditor, so we'll have to wait and watch for this. Now comes the very, very important point. Now we as chartered accountants are using some AI apps. When we are using some AI apps, remember, we are using for what? For tax advisory, compliance, income tax filing, whatever it is, right? The first question which we have to address. Are you able to hear me? Did I lose you? You're able to hear me, right? Suddenly there was some minor change in the settings. Okay, I'm assuming it is okay. If there is something, please ping me. Okay, so what is very interesting is the definition of data fiduciary. It says the fiduciary shall, irrespective of any agreement to the contrary or failure of data principle, shall be responsible for complying with the provisions of this act. So, as a chartered accountant, the fiduciary responsibility cannot be delegated and you will own that. You cannot hide saying that, hey, there is a service agreement and some clause, and therefore I'm not going to look into it. No. And you cannot claim client agreed to a different process and as a defense use that. So there will be a fiduciary responsibility, and you must ensure not only you, your client or your application which you're using is also compliant, which means you are using an app which is not compliant under the data privacy law, you could still be held liable. But this is only when personal information is involved. If personal information is not involved, you are free to use it. Hopefully you got an idea about this, right? Now, what is the grounds of processing, or what are the terms under which you can process personal data? Now, the law says there are only two scenarios where you can process the data. First is when you have taken a consent. Second, when there are certain legitimate uses. So consent is more like a, in contract law you would have read, right? A proposal gives an acceptance and then it becomes, a contract, binding, all of those things. Similarly, consent, the fiduciary issues a notice and the principal gives a consent, right? So that's something. The second, the law itself gives certain cases where you can use it, right? It's also called as certain legitimate use cases. So here, consent is not mandatory, whereas in the first case, consent has to be given. And this, who gives the consent? Obviously, the data principal. So how do I give the consent, and who has to give me this? The fiduciary has to provide the notice. In our example, ChatGPT provided the notice, right? And principal, that is you and I, gave the consent. Therefore, you are able to use that, right? Similarly, as a chartered accountancy firm, the chartered accountant may have to provide a privacy notice, and the client will have to agree, and only then you can get started. Sir, I am not using an online app. Why will a client give me a tick mark? It doesn't matter. You can put it by way of an engagement letter, which he will sign off, and then you get going, right? So that is something which you should keep in mind. Some elements from a notice perspective and consent perspective. First, I will talk about consent. Consent should be free. It should be very, very specific. It should not be generic. It should be informed. That means I am taking after quite aware of what are the nuances. It should be unconditional. That means ये हो गया तो वो होगा, वो हो गया तो ये होगा नहीं. Unambiguous. That means it should be very, very clear with affirmative action, and they should signify an agreement to process the data. So that is the requirement for a consent. And if a consent has to be given, then a notice has to be produced. And where this notice comes, notice should talk clearly about what is the personal data that has to be collected. And today I showed you some time back OpenAI's privacy policy. Now that privacy policy is the notice, right? The purpose for which the data is processed was mentioned. The rights of the data principle. I don't know if you remember, I was speaking about this, where it says that what are the rights of the data principle, right? So let me bring this up. Your rights. So it clearly says that these are the rights the data principle has, right? Next, manner in which the data principle can make a complaint to the board. This is again India specific. Since the laws just come up, we'll have to see how this works out. So remember, this is very, very important. And in India, they also say this notice should be provided in English, or it could be in any language specified in the 8th schedule, right? Hindi, Kannada, Malayalam, whatever, depending on the audience. But yes, that is what they say. A similar notice should be given as soon as practically possible for your existing contact information and parties as well, where you have already obtained consent, which means already in the past you have obtained consent. Should I obtain consent once again? Not required, but an updated notice should be sent across. And if they are not okay, they will opt out. Otherwise, you can continue to communicate to them. And such data can be processed till the time data principal withdraws the consent, right? So that's basically the requirement. So in summary, I need to produce a what? Notice, and the principal has to give the consent, right? So remember, when you're using any AI app, my request would be kindly go through this very clearly. For example, if I'm going to sign up, let us say AI app for, let us say very hypothetically, for music, right? Now they say that there is some Suno AI music app. I don't know what this is, but the moment I can see this, it will ask me to sign in. Do you notice here? So if I click on sign in, it says email ID and etc. And then do you notice this? By continuing, you accept our privacy policy. And if I click on privacy policy, it will talk about all of those. What is this privacy policy? What they collect, how they use your information, how they use cookies and similar technologies, how they share our information, how we store and secure, how long we retain the data, and all of those, right? And of course, they bring in certain specific things, rights of California users, rights of EEA users. Maybe in future you'll also have rights of Indian users, right? So those are things which will come up. So hopefully I gave you some clarity on this, right? Consent, I think we already spoke. In the interest of time, I'm not going too much deeper into it, right? Now imagine a telemedicine app. Telemedicine app is processing personal data. So they want your video to be on. Okay. Access to camera while using it. They want your geolocation because they say that, based on your geolocation, we can identify who's the local doctor. Still okay. Still okay. But they're asking for contact details of all your other persons. That is not okay. Because then they have access to your phone contact and other list, they will read through that and possibly send across a message or a communication. And this is where you need to be very, very careful that the contact list is not necessary. So consent is valid only for telemedicine and not for contact list. And that is why they say if you are obtaining consent, it has to be itemized consent. Consent 1, consent 2, consent 3, consent 4. You need to be very, very specific on this. Clear? Now we'll take this conversation to the next stage. I think we spoke about notice requirements, just a repetition of that. Again, interest of time moving ahead. Who could possibly be the significant data fiduciaries? As I said, it could be social media companies, maybe let's say 100 million user plus. Again, I'm just giving the number because this is likely. Remember, the law has not defined who will be an SDF. I repeat, the law has not defined who will be an SDF. It is prescribed a categories of person. It is not told who will fall under that. But I'm sensing that these are the major players who will fall under that. E-commerce companies, telco, financial institutions, payment aggregators, cloud service providers, healthcare, government agencies may all likely to be called as a significant data fiduciary. And if they're a significant data fiduciary, what happens? They will have to have a data protection officer, mandatory data audit, and more important, yearly data protection impact assessment they have to perform. Right? Now, in case of a child, I repeat, only in case of a child, you need to obtain a verifiable consent. And verifiable should be how will the child prove that X or Y is the parent. So there should be a verification mechanism, and that's where they say you can use a DigiLocker or an Aadhaar system. If a person is with disability, the guardian has to give that consent. Now, one more thing from a data privacy standpoint and from an AI standpoint is that a child information, you cannot do behavioral monitoring of it. Does that mean, sir, I can do behavioral monitoring of an adult? Unfortunately, the law has not prohibited that. Okay, but it also has to be defined in your privacy policy, and if it is in excess of the purpose for which it is collected, you can still go ahead and say this is against my fundamental right? Same way, any AI app or automated decision making directly targeted at children is prohibited, right? So these are some things which you should always be aware of. Now, the very interesting point which has come up, and this is something which you'll find in the AI world very difficult: withdrawal of consent. So, as a data principal or as a data subject, you can withdraw your consent. That means I'm no longer interested, I can withdraw the consent. And when I withdraw the consent, I can delete my entire data unless law requires you to retain that, right? So you have a provision to ask the AI app or any technology to delete the data. And not only should they delete in their system, they should also delete in the other ecosystem players. And who are the other ecosystem players? Data processors, sub-processors, and all of those, right? So that's going to be an interesting thing. Now, how will, as a CA firm, you delete, or how will, as a CA firm, your client gives you a request, sir, delete all my data. Now you can always cite professional guidelines or professional ethics and other things saying that I need to retain it for some X years, right? Which is fine. But if they say highly sensitive information, you may have to delete it or whatever, you'll have to respect that and figure out what you have to do, first thing. Second, but you have already shared this information to some app, some AI app, to do some formatting, PPT, online to PDF convert, PDF to online convert, whatever, right? It becomes a tricky affair. So please be very, very cautious. You will have to inform them also to delete. And last, the ease of deletion should be similar to the ease at which the consent was given. You should not make it so very complicated that he finds it, okay, fine, forget it, I'm not going to withdraw my consent, I might as well continue, right? So if you look again into OpenAI's policy, let's quickly look into it. Again, I'm just taking OpenAI as an example, more from a academic interest standpoint, okay? So if you see here, let's quickly search for the word deletion. Yeah. So what is your rights? Your rights include deletion of your personal data from our records. So when you delete, what happens? It will say, our services are not directed for children under 13. If you notice here, they say it is not for children under 13. If we knowingly collect, if we do not knowingly collect data from under 13, if you have a reason to believe that the child under 13 has provided personal data, then please write an email they've written. We will investigate, etc. If appropriate, and delete the personal data. Users under 18 must have permission from their parent or guardian to use our services. Can you see that the way it is written? Now, there is no way you will go ahead and verify. In India, they say if it is a child, you need to have a verifiable consent. That's going to be a little tricky thing. Okay. So that is something which I made a mention. I'll quickly go into child, no, sorry, deletion, right? So you will also find that, I have access verification. In order to protect your personal information from unauthorized access, we may require you to verify your credentials before you can submit a request to know, correct, or delete personal data. If you do not have account with us or we suspect fraudulent malicious activity, we may ask you to provide additional personal data for verification. I have noticed some of them when they ask for a deletion, right? We will first have to validate whether it is you who is writing the request for deletion or not. After that only we will initiate the deletion. So for that they will collect another personal data, right? I'm just giving you an example. So this is how tricky it actually gets into the ecosystem. So I'm not sure how many of them know in ChatGPT there is an option where you can go and delete your entire data where should you wish not to use the services. So you can go to the settings. I don't know here. I think I'm having some glitch in loading the ChatGPT, but I remember last time it was displaying in one corner. In the settings tab, it is there where you can go and delete the data, right? So you can probably Google search how to delete data in ChatGPT. Okay. Now, the second case where you are permitted to use data without consent is where voluntarily you have provided some information. This could be for voluntary provided where consent is not required. Data principal has not indicated does not consent to. That means he is sort of okay in sharing it, more like a voluntary. Any state and state instrumentalities, it could be the government authorities, income tax department, all of those comes under state and state instrumentalities. For matters concerning public interest, medical emergency, judicial use case, or maybe relating to publication, healthcare, etc. Those again, those are emergency situations. And last, for purpose of employment. So in case of employment, for safeguarding the employer from the loss or liability, you are permitted to use this, right? So that's basically how the entire ecosystem will work. Now comes very, very important. As a chartered accountant, what is my responsibility? The next 5-6 slides are something which I've customized and made it for chartered accountants. So kindly keep your ears and attention here. See, typically we do a lot of work either as an audit, as a tax return, accounting, some analysis, all of those, right? Now, what would be your category, right? Now, primarily you are a data fiduciary. That's why the word or a tick mark has come as a primary data fiduciary. Now, in certain cases, you will be a shared data fiduciary because you are collecting the data and not only are you processing, you're also giving it to the cloud service provider, right? So there you'll find it. And there's nothing called primary, shared or enhanced. I'm just talking about your roles and responsibility, right? You're doing some analysis, you're doing some etc., right? So when you're a primary data fiduciary, you already know what your responsibilities are. If you're enhanced or if you're having additional things, again, please note, this is not a terminology of the law. I'm just added this just for an example sake, right? In those cases, you will have to make sure that you are compliant with some of these rules which has been spoken about, right? And this, my dear friends, is very, very important from an AI perspective. If as an AI, you are using, for example, you're using ChatGPT to draft some findings, AI tool to detect unusual, etc. You need to make sure that whether are you compliant in using that AI software with help of personal information. No personal information involved, go ahead and use it, right? And I'm sure in a lot of the AI sessions in module on day 3, we would have made a mention of ethics in AI. So personal information, you have to very, very carefully use that, right? Now data shared with a concurrent auditor, data shared as a cloud backup, all of them, you have different scenarios, different outcomes which could possibly come into picture. So this is just an example for you to understand what accountability comes into picture. In general, your accountability is very simple. You are required to make sure that the consent is obtained. And when you're using an AI app, you need to make sure that whether that AI app is adhering to the DPDP requirements. Because if you are using an AI app without adhering to the DPDP requirements, unfortunately, you could be sued by your client, right? So please be very careful about it. Second, I think we spoke about this law grounds of processing. It's a typical 2-pillar framework. One is that you should have a consent, right? And second is you are supposed to have certain legitimate business use case. And we spoke about notice, consent, and legitimate use case. This is just one summary for you to get an idea. I understand there are some questions there which are coming. So what I'll do is I'll quickly try to wrap this up, and last 15 minutes or so I'll keep for Q&A so that you are able to ask. And if I'm not able to ask, then we'll see probably how we should be able to solve that. Yeah, this is something I made a mention. The power to give consent should also be equally similar to the power of withdrawal of consent. It should be as simple as a toggle button, switch on and switch off, right? So customer withdraws the consent from app, but the app stops future services, but must process the data for the purpose of existing paid order, right? So that's basically how the consent landscape works. Now, bear in mind, you cannot say that just because consent is not given or consent is withdrawn, I will delete the entire data. Now, you may want to record some information. For example, you are an e-commerce company or an AI-enabled application where somebody says, delete my data. Now, you can go ahead and delete the user's data, but assuming he has billing history, I cannot go and delete his billing history, right? Because if I delete his billing history, it may have an impact for me from a financial perspective. So you also need to clarify, or you also need to get clarity when you're using AI apps, what data which we are going to delete, what data which we are not going to delete, and that will help you decide, draw the entire framework. Okay. So let's quickly jump into some of the obligations, and please note who are data fiduciaries. I told you chartered accountants are likely to be data fiduciaries. You are overall accountable. You need to ensure you have security safeguards. I'll speak about security alone about 4 to 5 slides, what all you can enforce, accuracy and consistency, and purpose limitation. These are some things which you should have to keep in mind. As an individual, that is the personal data, the persons whose data you're processing, he has 6 rights. Right to access, that is he or she is interested to know where your personal data is kept, he will ask for the data. Right for correction in case mistakes are there. Grievance redressal, this is more of a fundamental right. Grievance redressal, nothing specific to data privacy. Right to withdraw consent, we spoke about. Right to complain, so if you have any unresolved issue, complain directly to the board. And last but not the least, right to nominate. This is a unique right which is there only in DPDP law, right? Only in India. It is not there in any other thing, right? So that's basically how this entire landscape operates. Fair enough. Let's quickly move on. Okay. Some of you mentioned that they were not able to see the OpenAI screen. Let me quickly see if I can share it once again, the privacy policy. And I will also share it in the chat for those who are not able to see that. Is that okay? So I open chat, I can send a message to everyone, and I'm just pasting it here, right? So this is where you can see some of the OpenAI policies, and I will quickly share that screen once again for the benefit of all of you. In Zoom, I think you can share 2 screens at a time. Give me a minute quickly for that. I'm going to click on close this. I'm going to share 2 screens. Let me know if you're able to see the screen. Can somebody confirm in the chat that yes, they're able to see the OpenAI screen? Yeah, at least I am in my preview. I'm able to.
Yes, sir.
Okay, lovely. Thank you for that. Yeah, so this is
Additionally, you
what I
state
was speaking to you some time ago. This is the privacy information. Vishnuji, where was this visible earlier or this was not visible?
this was not visible earlier, sir.
Okay, my apologies. Then I thought I was explaining all of this with that, but nevertheless, good that somebody highlighted to me. So we'll quickly run through the privacy policy of OpenAI as I made a mention. The personal data which we collect in OpenAI, it says what all they are going to collect, and it clearly says account information, and this includes name, credentials, date of birth, payment information, etc. And most important, my dear friends, is this point: user content. We collect personal data that you provide in the input to our services, including your prompt, content, file, image, audio, depending on the features you use. So everything which you share, whether it has personal information or not, right? Look at this, OpenAI, and it is you. Whatever information you share to ChatGPT is treated as your data, and therefore it's called user content, and therefore it's called personal data. Now, using this personal data, what does OpenAI do? Look at this. How we use your personal data? They say to provide, analyze our services and to improvise and develop our services, including conduct research. So, if you shared any information to ChatGPT by way of a prompt, can I say that it is a personal data as far as ChatGPT is concerned? Because ChatGPT is defined, personal data includes user content. So whatever you upload in ChatGPT is your user content, and that ChatGPT is going to use to improvise that. So that is why we keep on saying never share confidential data, never share personal information of your clients, etc. to ChatGPT, because it will learn from it. It will use to develop the services. It will probably try to do mischief out of it, right? So that is where it becomes very important for us. Hopefully all of us are clear with this. That is some fundamental point which you should keep in mind. Next, what does ChatGPT or what does these people do? They also share the personal data to others. They share it to vendors. They may share it by way of a business transfer. They may share it to government or other parties, and they may also share it with affiliates, right? So these are the parties who will have access, and they retain this data based on what you configure as the retention policy, but it is based on purpose, nature, sensitive, etc. But very important, your temporary chat. Some of you know, I think in ChatGPT you would have used a temporary chat, right? So you go to the top corner in the ChatGPT. This button, if you click, this extreme right is called as a temporary chat. My ChatGPT is having some issues since this morning. I'll have to log out and log in. But anyways, right? So this, my dear friends, is a classical example of that, right? Now, next, let's look into what is your rights. Your rights meaning the data principal rights, also called as data subject right. In India, we use the word data principal. Globally, they use the word data subject. So what is your rights? Your rights are access to personal data, delete your personal data. So even you have access to delete this sort of a personal data. You can withdraw your consent. This is all the same things which the personal data has. But you also have transferred a personal data to a third party, also called as data portability. This is a right under the global law, not under the Indian law. Right? So if they have a feature, great, but the Indian law does not require you to have portability. The European law requires you to have portability, and that's why it is there, right? Withdraw your consent. This is something which is a common. An object to process, lodge a complaint, etc. All of these. Okay. And it talks about how you should be dealing with this, right? And it also defines children. Our services are not directed for children under 13. And it also says if we will investigate any notification if appropriate and delete the personal data from our systems. Next, very important, users under 18 must have permission from their parent and guardian to use the services. Now, how will you verify that? This is going to be tricky, right? So if you choose age as whatever, and it comes to less than 18, it will ask you to enter the parent details. The parent has to confirm. For example, if you go to Google and say create a Google email ID for a child. Sorry, I think I made a typo, right? So it says, look at this email ID for a child. You can create a Google ID for a child under 13 as the applicable age in your country. Why? Just for your information, in India, privacy consent is less than 18, child is, is a child. In the Europe, each country has a different definition of child for the purpose of data privacy, right? FIR. So manage your child's Google account within family. It says that it takes about 15 minutes to create. Go to Google account, create your child account, to provide parental consent for your child account, sign in with your own Google account and choose the preferred way, right? But remember, this is consent with a verification. But under the data privacy law, this is not a verifiable consent, because how do you know that the child belongs to this parent? You understood the problem? Right, I'm sure you would have seen in all of these movies where somebody child, and for college examination or for principal asked to come, some parents, artificial parents come and things like that, right? So some sort of a dramatic situation. So those are not applicable in India. You need to have verifiable parent consent that is done through DigiLocker or through Aadhaar. Those are two methods given. There could be other methods as well, right? Security element, we have not come into it. We'll address that. But in general, unauthorized access disclosure, alteration disclosure, all these things are there. These are US specific disclosures. I think I spoke about deletion as well, right? So right to delete your personal data. Then verification, in order to protect your personal data from unauthorized actions, they might ask you to delete as well, right? So I'll also go to another app, which is Ola, which is from India. So just for you to know how the Ola, I think they call it as Kutrum or something. Kutrum, Ola, Kutrum, AI app. I'm just giving you a context, right? Because from an India perspective. So they also have their own element. So first AI assistant, it does some basic stuff like this they've given. So again, please note, all of them are done from educational initiative, nothing to promote or go against any of them, purely from an educational perspective, right? So if you go here, somewhere below, you will find the privacy policy. So if you read their privacy policy, it says what? Kutrum process the personal data information. Please note, all these companies are following the old privacy requirements. None of them have migrated to DPDP because the law itself is just 1 month old since the notification. 18 months are available for you to get started, right? So it talks about whatever, lot of interesting information. It talks about automated decision making. It talks about processor. It talks about principal. So earlier this was called as data subject. And once the DPDP came into picture, they started calling as data principal. Okay. So you will find who is the data protection officer, what are the details, what is the type of personal information they collect, information which you provide, and here comes automatic data collection. They said device data such as your computer, mobile, operating system, details, screen resolution, all of these things are collected. Okay. Online activities such as screens you have viewed, how long you have spent on a particular page or screen, the website you visited, the browsing service. So you can imagine what is the extent to which they're collecting the data, right? They also to collect cookies. Cookies are temporary files stored in website, so in your own system, so that the loading of the website is faster. Okay. Web beacons, all these things are again used to make sure that you're able to access it faster, and it was also used to know how many times you have click rates and other things. Okay. Next, personal information that we may receive from other sources. Say, for example, you are using your email ID, which is linked through an Ola cab or anything. They say that was also something which they will process. So each of us, just for you to get an idea, there's a lot of interesting things in the personal data world. So that is something which I just wanted to give you a heads up on that. Okay. So now I quickly come back to my PPT. I hope the PPT is visible. So we spoke about the rights of an individual. So this is where you would have found the rights of the individual. Let's quickly see rights. Where is rights? Yeah, rights of data principle. If you live anywhere in India, the law has various rights bestowed upon you. We will confirm your identity. So what are the rights? Access of personal information, rectify, withdrawing your consent, objecting, erasing your personal information, right to port. This right to port is optional. In India, the DPDP does not mandate it. In the Europe, it is mandatory. Right to be forgotten is nothing but erasure, right? So these are things which we just saw. And right to nominate, none of them have notified it, but it will start notifying because this is a new right which is given only under the recent legal requirement. Okay. Next, as fiduciaries, what are additional things, especially SDF? I said you need to appoint a data protection officer. The DPO has to be an individual residing in India only. He shall report to the board of directors. This is something like your local resident director requirement. Okay. He will be responsible for monitoring compliance and all those. engaging independent auditor, because these are professional opportunities. So if a SDF is there, it shall appoint a data auditor who shall evaluate the compliance with the law, rules, etc. He shall also look into technical measures and organizational measures. What are those? We will address in some time. Then you also have DPIA, Data Protection Impact Assessment. It talks about what are the rights, what are the purpose, how does it have an impact to the data principal rights. So this is an entire detailed exercise, and this should be done once in every 2 months. Remember, it's not an annual affair, because if it's an annual affair, you can do it in January, you can do it in next year December. So they say once in every 2 months. The gap should not exceed 12 months. Now comes a very interesting thing. What if I'm using any automated decision making or an AI based system, right? There is a mandatory requirement for checking hosting, modification, transmission. All of these things has to be checked when you're using any of the AI solutions. And if you are developing an AI publication or platform or solutions, please check all of this, right? It should not possess any sort of a risk to the data principal, right? And then comes the implementation. The implementation would be, you will have to do algorithm audits, or I'm talking more from an organization perspective. Get a comfort that these algos are doing the designated work and not trying to bypass and doing something. They should be tested for bias. This is very, very important, right? Fairness assessment, it should be able to make a reasonable judgment and impact assessment for automated decision. So if you're using algorithms or softwares which is taking automated decision, keep these things in mind and make an attempt to test that. While it is not possible to eliminate every possible error, but you will at least get to know how possibly errors can come or issues might come. A very interesting requirement of data localization. Remember, most of the AI apps are not hosted in India, right? And this is where it becomes very interesting. So if I'm using any AI app which is hosted anywhere else outside of India, remember, the government has currently, luckily it has said, only if you have restricted data, you cannot keep it outside of India. That means restricted data is basically biometric, healthcare, financial records, and government issued identifiers, PAN, Aadhaar, etc. These should not go outside India. Anything outside of this, you are okay to share it. So if I have my name of my client and email ID of my client and mobile number of my client, and I am sort of okay in sharing it, no problem, you can send it through an AI app, but please be very careful. It could still backfire, but suggested not to do it. But assuming you're storing it in a CRM or any software which has some AI feature, but it is not relating to credit card, which is fine, right? So currently the data localization requirement is applicable for RBI. It is applicable for IRDA, insurance companies. For SEBI, the law initially said you need to have data localization, and then they clarified if it is regulated data alone, it should be within India. If it is not regulated, you can have it basic data, and they've given some clarification what is regulated data and not regulated data. You can look it up. So the summary is, if you are dealing with personal information, again a reason for you to not upload into AI apps, because if you upload it, this data is going outside of India, right? While the strict restriction is applicable only for banks, insurance companies, and that related domain, very soon we can expect some restrictions on this. Now, if you are using any AI enabled tools, right? Because that is also something which I wanted to cover. Now, remember, every AI tool will be regulated. You know why? The AI tool may be hosted outside of India. But if the user is in India, the service is rendered in India, DPDP is applicable for that AI tool. Remember the extraterritorial jurisdiction I told you, right? So which means literally any tool, wherever it is hosted, if the service is delivered here in India and you're able to prove that the service is delivered, my dear friends, DPDP is applicable. That means technically every SaaS company or every AI based platform, wherever they're in the world, DPDP becomes applicable. But you cannot enforce on them, it's going to become difficult. right? So my sense would be from document analyzers to predictive analytics you're using, practice management softwares, etc. Please make sure localization is taken care first, right? I'm sure many of you would be using a lot of data local, what is that? Practice management software. Make sure that the practice management software, AWS, Azure, Oracle Cloud, wherever it is hosted within India. Please take care of that. Second, fundamental workflow change. Only limited purpose, please process the data. Don't no longer take every possible information. If required, take it. Not required, do some analysis, give it back. Right? Your consent should be very, very carefully written and drafted. And very important, you need to also create a retention schedule. It is not so easy. It's going to be a time consuming. Right? Next, if legacy data you have, you have not taken a proper consent, no problem. You draft a privacy policy and while sending a communication to them, send it across and inform everybody and say, hey, this is my policy, and if you have any objection, please let me know. Otherwise, consent is by default understood. Okay. Next, if you're using international AI platforms, I told, like US based tax softwares, global audit tools, right? Please check whether the tool has adequate data protection safeguards. My suggestion would be please read their privacy policy once, right? And also document how they're trying to take care. Go by a risk based approach, highly sensitive, never use it, or automated decision, never use it, or use it with very, very careful this thing. If it's a low risk, I think it's okay. Now, CAs, as I told you, all of you are data fiduciaries. Now, when we are fiduciaries, because we determine the means and purpose of processing, right? So, client relationship management, practice development, marketing analytics, all these data which we are collecting. Now, my clients' employee data as I'm also collecting, there we are more of a processor obligation. So, there the contract with your client will define. So, it is okay. But whenever you are fiduciary, you need to be very, very careful. You need to lawfully process only after consent, limit the purpose, and data minimization. Implement reasonable security safeguards. I'll speak about security safeguards towards the end. Enable data principal rights. If so, they have a means or questions for you to get clarity, please do that. Or you can say, here's my privacy policy, read that for further information. Appoint a DPO if it is required, if you're processing at scale. Generally, CA firms may not become a significant data fiduciary, but voluntary basis, you can appoint a DPO. Accountability, as I said, maintain processing records, perform data privacy impact assessment. So what is data privacy impact assessment? In simple language, exactly what I've told slide by slide, you have to follow. Check what we have done, what was the situation, are we adhering, not adhering, as simple as that. Don't break your head too much, right? So that is basically what the expectation is. I see a lot of questions coming in, so please be a little patient. I will definitely take some of these questions. I'll try as much as possible to address them. Okay. Next is now you're using AI for some compliance, you're using for some AI for whatever, all of those things. You are using AI for consent management, etc. All of these things are possible, but remember the principles explained in DPDP should not be diluted, right? If your consent management solutions, if you are using in future, right, it is fine, but the principles of DPDP and clear affirmative action should be taken care. So there might be consent management solutions which there are about 10 or 15 which has been identified, and few more will join that league. As of now, nobody is officially registered as a consent manager because we still have time. But if that comes, yes, you will find a lot of companies trying to do a lot of marketing. But these consent managers are likely to get integrated with CRM, right? You might have some refresh workflows and things like that. We'll have to see how this world evolves. Yeah. Notice, as a CA firm, please make sure that you have a clear-cut notice. You may use some of these AI softwares to create notice. It is reasonably good, but this make it as simple and plain language as possible so that you don't have too much of deviations, right? And you should also talk about who are the fiduciary, what is the purpose of processing the data, what is your data retention period, and rights of data principals. And who is the data principal? Whoever we spoke of, right? You can go to ChatGPT and say, give me a data privacy policy as per DPDP requirements. Maybe it will give you a shot, right? Also try to create some template libraries, automate updates, and multi-channel delivery, email portal if you have an app, etc. In all these methods, you may probably want to make sure that you are communicating to your client so that consent is taken. Sometimes you may probably just want to take it over a physical signature. That is also possible. Principle of data minimization, very, very important. Collect data only if it is necessary. Identify unnecessary data and stop collecting it. Sir, I want client's bank statement. I want client's mutual fund statement. I want client's NSDL cards. I don't know, whatever, right? If there is purpose, you take it. Otherwise, my suggestion is not to take it, right? Because especially if it is irrelevant or you're collecting too much, very difficult. Or you can do a small workaround. You can create one work drive or SharePoint or a Google Drive. Ask client to upload and give only view only access. So you're trying to minimize, right? Only what is necessary you're trying to download, right? Collect only what is needed, retain only for necessary duration. No, it's not like forever. And you can pseudonymize or anonymize. This is a very, very important principle in AI, or sorry, in data privacy. Anonymize is basically convert one form into another form. But you should not be able to reverse it, right? It's not encryption, it is converting one form to another form, but reversing you should not be able to do. Let's take a simple example. I have all the alphabets. From that alphabet, I'm creating one unique code. And using that code, instead of the name of the person, I'm using the code of that person, right? So that is anonymization. But you should not be able to reverse identify. So if this code pertains to this person, you should not be able to identify. If you're able to identify, that is called pseudonymize. Like a pseudonymize example, simple example is employee name versus employee ID. So I know employee ID. From employee ID, I can go to the master and pick up who's the employees. But if I don't know the employee ID, right? And that is where the entire challenge comes in, right? And then where do I use some of these AI tools for minimization? You can use it for data reduction, autonomous workflow, purpose-based controls, or retention and things like that. So you can build some of the AI within that. So this will help you to save the entire workflow there. A few best practices, yes. Make sure privacy by design is taken care, right? Embed privacy controls into the AI systems. Make sure that the default settings are privacy focused, and I'm sure you would have got an idea what these are. Perform DPIA assessments, data protection impact assessments, especially when you're processing any AI based data. And I told you what personal data you're processing, how you're processing, what is the impact, what is the repercussions, etc. And please keep privacy principles in mind while you're processing. And last but not the least, ethical data management. Focus on ethical considerations. And when you use the word ethical considerations, make sure the data is fair, avoid bias, right? Transparency is the key. I'm sure in ethics in AI, you would have learned FATEP. And by the way, there is a publication itself from the Institute on Ethics in AI related. Please go through that. Professional ethics of CA, not to be forgotten, right? And obviously make sure that you are able to get that trust factor. Otherwise, the whole game gets defeated. Okay. So these are few very important things. And what is your implementation roadmap? That is probably a very key slide, which I have just made it. Give me a minute. Where is this? Yes, here it is. First few months, you will probably have to identify what type of data you have, what is the classification, am I using any AI audit tool, or am I using anything for my risk assessment? Is that compliant with DPDP, right? All of those you'll have to do. Once it is done, then start making sure that your privacy policies, consent frameworks are there. Very important, please make sure your vendors are compliant as well. The entire ecosystem privacy law requires you to be compliant. And then comes implementation, which will take a good amount of time. And very important, periodical monitoring, because the penalties are fairly huge. I've not spoken about the penalties, but I'll bring that up. Okay. So I have a few more slides before I wrap this up. So yes, so quickly moving on to certain key things which I'll pick up. Data breach, I think we already spoke about. Very important, this data breach, they have not quantified what is a breach which we have to report to the board, but every breach we have to report to the board is what we will have to understand now. Maybe they'll come up with a rule if it is impacting more than this much rupees, this many customers, etc. So you will have to inform to the board, and board here is the data protection board. Failure to comply, you know what is the maximum penalty which could be levied. So overall, these are the penalty landscape. For failure to implement security safeguards, 250 crore, failure to notify the board, 200, 200 crore for breach of obligations, this list keeps on going. But I only want to say it's a costly affair, right? Yeah, very important. What are the security safeguards my organization should have? Certain things should be focused clearly on data security. Make sure that encryption of personal data is taken care, right? Obfuscation, masking, censorship portion. I know encryption of personal data may not be possible in all cases, but wherever practical, please do that. Try to mask data instead of using the data at raw form. Virtual tokens like what you see in your credit card, etc., you may want to consider. Next, you may also want to see how you can enforce access restrictions, role-based access restrictions, multi-factor authentication, privilege management, all of those things you'll have to enable. That is, you're restricting the access only to the needful people. Then comes monitoring and logging. Who has access? Who can monitor? What are the audit trails? Real-time alerts? All of these also is something which you can use it, right? So from a security perspective. Second, ensure disaster recovery and continuity is there, because tomorrow your services are not available. You need to make sure that redundancy measures are there, backup is there, and please ensure your backup is also DPDP compliant, right? Your primary system or server where you store is DPDP compliant, your backup is not DPDP compliant, it becomes problem. Next, very, very important, processor contracts. All the data processors, please enter into a separate contract with them. It could be cloud service provider, it could be apps, it could be anything, right? Some cases you may not be able to explicitly provide, but there will be a terms of service. You'll have to agree to that, right? So make sure security obligations are there, right to audit is there, and you also have a data protection liability clause. So which would also mean insurance you may probably want to take, professional indemnity insurance, etc. Technical and organizational measures, there's more from an infosec policy, awareness, training, all of these becomes very handy. And retention of the data, general retention is 1 year unless the principal has withdrawn consent. And even if it is withdrawn consent, doesn't mean that you go and delete the law. Sorry, delete the information. If the law requires you to keep it for a longer period, yes, you need to keep it. Example, Companies Act says, I think 8 years or something. Income Tax Act might say 7 years. Your Prevention of Money Laundering Act says 10 years. So there are different cases. In those cases, you can keep it. In case you are deleting it much before, you will have to serve a notice to them before you delete it, right? As I said, mandatory 1 year, especially for logs and processing data. Then there's also a seventh schedule, which talks about investigation, all those scenarios. And if you're erasing it much before, you need to give a 48-hour notice, and make sure you are not only reading this in conjunction, this law plus the other law. Which is the other law? It could be income tax, it could be GST, it could be RBI. They talk about other retention requirements. If you have a data protection officer, need to make sure that they report to the board of directors. It should be an individual only, and they should be resident in India. That's the only requirement. Qualifications, other things are not defined. You could, as a chartered accountant, become a consulting DPO. We never know. That's also a good professional opportunity. Yes, but you will have to make sure that your contact details, name details, all of these are clearly mentioned in the website. Okay. So some special pointers for you. E-commerce, social media companies, online gaming companies, they've just made certain restrictions. We may probably not go into too much because these are, whether it's AI or non-AI, I just want to restrict it to AI related information. But the fact is, 2 crore plus users, if you have e-commerce, your retention is 3 years, 48 hours erasure notice. Social media, especially for child protection measures, have to be there. Similarly for online gaming companies. And they also talk about responsible gaming and data processing. Healthcare talks about how you deal with the data, sensitive information, how we are protecting it. All those becomes mandatory. So yes, so that's the major thing which I wanted to cover, because then comes the data protection board, which is just DPDP, which is set up, not something which is too much of important. They are basically set up for the purpose of enforcing the law. If you remember, I told you Information Technology Act, we didn't have an enforcement authority. Here we have a specific enforcement authority. That's something which you should be aware of. They can issue directions, they can take suo motu notices, they can recommend blocking repeated offenders, and there's a bunch of powers which they have. We spoke about taking data outside of India. We also spoke about timelines. So yeah, so what is the blueprint for readiness? Whether you are using AI, not using AI, you are using an AI app, you are automating your process. First is make sure that the lawful obligations are adhered, users are empowered, security is taken care, and accountability is clearly built, right? So that brings me to the end of this. Of course, these are the penalties and other elements. Just quickly seeing if anything else is necessary. Yeah, I think that's about it. Happy to take your conversations. My name is Narsimanilangovan. I'm co-founder and head of cybersecurity in Incorp Advisory Services. Happy to take your questions and queries. I understand some questions are coming in the chat window. My goodness. I have about 50 odd questions. Let me see what I can pick up. Okay, I'll start with the first one. What if visiting card is having a QR code? The moment you scan it and you're saving it, it becomes digital data. Disclosure requirements on financials on account of DPDP, nothing, no disclosure. If there is a penalty or if there is a liability, you have to disclose. Contingent liability or anything on those lines, your accounting standard comes into picture. Fiduciary and processor can be the same. Unlikely, they might be doing the same element, but generally fiduciary and processor will be two different parties, because processor is processing based on the instructions of the fiduciary, and fiduciary decides the means and purpose. Okay. Embassies abroad giving servicing, collecting, maintaining database, DPDP is applicable. Embassy would be a government authority or a government, what do you call? They use some word, right? It comes under the government definition. So therefore, I think they would be exempt to some extent, but the principles would be applicable for them. Any SDFE is notified by central government? No. Certain empanel required for data audit? We do not know. Do we have option to deny to process our data? Yes. So the question is whether if you want the services, you may have to agree. If you don't want to the services, you may have to figure out. But there could be certain cases which is very weird, right? Now, for example, you are going for ordering a pizza and they are saying mandatory you have to give the mobile phone number, right? If there is a reason, okay. Otherwise, I think it is incorrect. So therefore, you could file a complaint, but let's wait for the authority to come up. How can a data fiduciary made liable for failure of compliance of data processor? Yes, because data fiduciary decides the means and purpose of processing. So it is his responsibility, because the contractual obligation and consent is between the data fiduciary and the data principal, right? Or controller and the data subject. So processor is acting according to the instructions. So to whomever it is outsourced, the fiduciary's responsibility as to how he manages control over the processor. DPDP wants an explicit consent. Can engagement letter be? No, engagement letter is an explicit consent only. Engagement letter is an explicit consent. You cannot say as an implicit. Engagement letter is a direct consent. What is the role of CA in this act? I think lots are there. Don't think that we will from a tax audit or a GST audit, but more like from a consultant. Next is, yeah, can't see the screen. I'm apologies. I think I have made sure it is there. If I'm redacting the data, there's no issues. Yes, if you're anonymizing the data, then it is taken care. Client has shared bank statement whether transaction ID is to be considered as personal data. Transaction ID, Little tricky because only with transaction ID you cannot identify whose it is, right? Account number and account ID obviously are personal data. Now, if I give a transaction ID to anybody other than bank, they will not be able to identify that. So little tricky. I would not say it's 100% personal data. Thoda borderline mein hai. Is DPDP Act deals with personal data. Why do we need to comply when we are collecting data of company or audit? Remember, when you're doing company or audit, you will get access to certain personal information. To that extent, it will be applicable. If you're using AI for bank audit purpose and uploading bank data, so whether DP Act will convert 100%. Any AI app you're using, my dear friends, digital data you're using. So DPDP Act will come into picture. I don't know how CP works, so probably I'll exclude that. Are there concern manager in operation? Not yet. By next year, you will get the official people. If you're using ChatGPT business, still it will access our data. Yes, it doesn't matter. Vijay sir has given a good point. Typical issues arise where data fiduciary use tools like I love pdf.com. I agree with you, sir, because the data processor would include Android OS, Adobe Scan, etc. That means CA is attracting a lot of risk. Absolutely, sir. Thanks, Vijay sir, for giving this in your own style of jovial this thing, a good friend and a well-wisher. Thank you, Vijay sir. So basically what sir is also trying to say is whenever we upload our data to any website, right, where we try to what is that ROC, what is that we have to zip that and we unzoom, or what is that, unzip, zip, file size reduction, etc. So all of those my dear friends, DPDP will be applicable. They will be treated as processor because you are taking personal information and you are uploading there. Forget that. You get a client bank statement. That client bank statement, you are what do you call you are converting it into Excel format in using some website. That is also DPDP, right? So please keep that in mind. If you're using enterprise version, etc., please read through the privacy policy. That is what is very important. Jignesh, ChatGPT, they're storing for 30 days. So after 30 days, they're deleted. Yeah, so you need not place a separate request for delete. Any notification issued under rule 13.4. So as of now, we only have the base framework setup, nothing beyond that. DPDP Act will affect the work of peer reviewer as practicing CA may refuse some info as client has not given info, may want to complete. Not necessary, sir. If you're doing a peer reviewer also, it's a professional engagement, right? So you can enter into agreement, have that clause, have non-disclosure and other things and do it. Nothing works out, go on site and do the audit. Who can do DPIA data audit? Anybody at this point in time? Should we keep a copy of privacy policy we can accept in AI website for our records? Yeah, you can keep it, no problem. How much cost will increase? Very difficult to say, but my suggestion is you'll have to fine tune your processes. We'll come up with something on implementation toolkit very soon, so let's wait for that. Hosting data on cloud server owned by a service provider in India, I think it should be okay. Just make sure encryption precautions. He also adheres to the same security requirements. How do we know whether OpenAI or any platform is misusing your personal information? Nobody has an idea about it. Okay. My goodness. I've answered 40. I still have another 50 questions. Okay. I'm trying as much as possible to make it short and quick answers. Any organization using Outlook under his domain name, whether DPDP Act will apply? I think, yeah, digital data it applies if you're dealing with personal information. Associate traffic data processing logs to be retained for a period of 1 year. Yes. Online shopping 5 years. How do the platform determine which data must be deleted immediately and which one should be retained? So yeah, logs and other things you have to delete it, Nibu, Jacob. Any transactional data and other information you may want to read it. User behave profiler and other things you can delete it. What would be the cost of getting an app website tested for DPDP complaint? I have no clue. Please write to me. We'll figure out what it is. Major difference between Indian DPDP Act and international standards? Anirudh, good question. Long conversation. So I think we have tried to do some justice in one of the publications of the ICAI. So please pick up from that. Is there a penalty for not taking separate consent? Yes. See, Amita, yes, penalty would be there, and we already spoke about the penalty clause. Penalty is the maximum amount. It is maximum amount. It can be much lesser than that. Deepak Thakkar, does DPDP Act has overriding power over? No, no. DPDP Act has overriding power only to a limited extent. Generally, copyright law or regulator where they have given, that law will always strike the front seat. Is there any time limit to withdraw consent? No. KYC handled by banks are not masked as concurrent auditor. We may have to highlight. Good question. Swapnil Modi, good point. Yes, please do that. I also now have an audit observation. Is there a penalty for not taking separate consent? I spoke. What could be the cost of getting, okay, any additional term needed to be added in EL or statutory? Yes, please add that. Please add some additional clauses in terms of personal data and other things. A person uses DigiLocker for KYC, data gets leaked. Yeah, that's fine. If the data gets leaked after it is come into your system, you will be responsible. If the data come leaked at the DigiLocker environment itself, I think that is fine. How can AI aid in real-time anomaly detection relating to data breaches? Very, very large question, and I may not be able to finish it within the time. But yes, it is basically using for monitoring, transaction monitoring systems and things like that. That is something which definitely have. How do you secure clients' data from being hacked? Please attend DISA course. We'll speak more about it. I think it might be too short of time for me to answer that. But there are hundreds of this thing. GST PAN is private data but is displayed on boards. Good question. GST and PAN, I agree with you. It's a challenge actually. I don't know if the law will get amended to mention restricted information. But again, it's okay. It's not that every company is displaying everywhere, right? The risk is still lesser. Who will be doing periodical audit of SDF? Data auditors. It can be internal, external. We do not know. We have to wait. Consent manager is a separate domain. You can probably look up that and you will get some more data about it. What else is there? Just give me a minute. Yeah, Rishiji, I will just finish another 4 or 5 questions and then we can take the feedback or any other pointers if that is okay. If no overriding power, how can PCA prevent himself in case he deletes data before time as per DPDP? How to prevent penalties? Okay, too many big questions there. Deepak Thakurji, I think the sense would be your DPIA will give you an idea for that. Start with that. Once you complete it, that will give you some sort of answer. I think that will help you out. But generally, you are permitted by way of professional laws and regulations to store the data for some time. I think that's okay. What about use of SharePoint service? Yeah, same thing, same principle. We receive many projects for AI modeling. How and what to extent we can comply? Every AI solution has to be compliant with the DPDP law of the land. It will take some time, but they will invariably comply. It's another matter. You might use a solution and they may not be compliant. So the risk is still under you because they are always a control. You are the fiduciary, they are the processor. So remember that. If you are uploading anything on web, yes. Is there penalty for not taking consent? I think we spoke. Digital GST PAN, certain government organizations forced us to provide Aadhaar number instead of using VID. What is the solution? I think it's only education and awareness. It will take some time. As a practicing CA data fiduciary, whether CA having 100 clients whose client data can be considered as data fiduciary, sir, a CA will always be a data fiduciary, sir, because we are collecting personal data, means and purpose we are deciding. How do you secure? I think we spoke about a lot of security measures. When a customer shops online, the payment gateway and delivery courier under DPI, how to determine whether these parties were. Remember, when you are doing an online shopping with Amazon, you are sharing your data with Amazon. So you are always the principal. Amazon is always the fiduciary. Any intermediary player which Amazon uses is the controller. Is the processor. Beg your pardon. I think I've answered most of the questions. The rest all are fairly generic questions. I may probably want to skip. Rishi ji, if you want anything else to speak about, I think it was quite an interesting conversations. Roughly about 1,000 people have attended, and close to about 100 plus questions I've answered. Some of them are repeat and some of them are not so relevant. I think it is a good starting point. My suggestion and request is only do not take DPDP for granted. If not anything, the penalties are something very high. Please double check how personal data in your organization is coming in, processing, and using, and make yourself aware of all the nuances relating to personal data. That's my request. Or somebody has told that 1,000 on Zoom, 800 on YouTube. Okay, that's a fairly very large audience. Thank you so much for very patient hearing. And I will hand it over to Rishi ji. And I've anyway shared my credentials in the last slide. So if there's anything, we can connect. Not sure if I'll be able to answer your questions, but let me see what is possible. Rishi ji, back to you.
Thank you so much, sir. It was a privilege hearing to you, your words of wisdom. And as we close this session, we thank all our participants, all our esteemed speakers. But before that, we would extend our sincere gratitude to our leadership, that is CA Charanjot Singh Nanda, sir, President, sir, CA Prasanna Kumar D, Vice President, sir, CA Umesh Sharma, sir, Chairman, and CA Dayanavas Sharma, sir, Vice Chairman, whose vision and guidance continue to drive the AI transformation agenda in ICAI and enable such impactful knowledge building platforms. Today's session has shed valuable light on how the DPDP Act is transforming organizational responsibilities and redefining the professional role of CAs in ensuring data ethics, privacy compliance, governance, and responsible AI adoption. A heartfelt thanks to our distinguished speaker for today, that is CA Narasimhan Elangovanji, for his dedicated efforts, expert insights, and the clarity with which he has decoded both AI concepts and the DPDP regulatory landscape. Your contributions have truly enriched the learning experience for all participants. Before we close, we would also thank our audience, without whose active engagement the session for today was not to be a success. As we navigate this fast-changing tech and regulatory environment, continuous learning and responsible adoption will be the key, and AI and ICAI committee remains committed to supporting the profession with more such programs, workshops, and publications. And before we close, an important announcement. The registrations for the ICAI World Forum of Accountants 2.0 happening at Greater Noida, India Expo Center in March is open. We are receiving large number of entries, and the early bird discounts are still open till the 15th of December 2025. I would like to play a short video for you for the same.
I'm excited looking at the crowd that has come here, and I'm reminded of the days when your institute started. All of you are aware that the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India was set up an Act of Parliament way back on 1st July 1949. Last message of the day, we have to keep performing for this great country, making it the superpower of the world and empowering our fellow members so that all of us can create history, breach benchmarks. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your patient seeing of the video. And before we close, we have given the links for the official WhatsApp channel for AI and ICAI. Please remain connected and join, if you have not joined till now, to the official WhatsApp channel of AI and ICAI to get regular updates about the various initiatives, programs, and other activities of the committee. And it was a great session today. And once again, a great thanks to our faculty for today, C. Narasimhan, Elangovanji. And thank you once again all for your presence and participation. Wishing you all continued success in a journey towards responsible and future-ready professional excellence. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye. Tech support, can we close?
Yes, okay.